I want to start off by talking about some basic things because Moshe Halfon, who was here last week, did some explanations, but some people are familiar with this stuff and some people aren't. So I want to do a little bit of a background. But first, I want to say, how come I started getting interested in the Omer? Why did it reach out to me? It's because I had gone to some traditional synagogues where at a certain point near the end of the service, they would do some quick blessing, and there would be some numbers in there, and that was it. And I said, "What are they doing?" I said, "Oh, they're counting the Omer." Oh, huh? And I realized that this period of 49 days of counting the Omer is the longest bracketed period of time in the Jewish calendar. We have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, but 49 days, there's nothing like it. And the other thing that interested me is that, on Shabbat, you're not supposed to cut anything. And there's two exceptions to that. One of them is the bris, the Brit Milah. If it happens on the 8th day, happens to be on Shabbat, you cut, even though it says not to cut anything. And the other exception is the Omer. When you're counting, you cut the Omer, you're cutting the sheaves of grain, even on Shabbat, you cut. So that was where I said, what is this thing that it's so important that it brackets a long, big period of time and you're commanded to cut when usually you're not. So that's how my interest got started. And the more I got into it, the more I got into it. And that interest culminated in 10 years of research, probably 15 years of working on this material with my meditation group that was meeting weekly in my house for 20 years and sending the manuscript to a publisher who said, yes, I want to publish this, and promptly went out of business. And then to another publisher who said, yes, I want to publish this, and then changed their mind and decided they were never publishing anything like that ever again. So it went on the back burner until I finally found the right match, and voila, here it is. It's now been out for 10 years, which is why it was considered to be out of print before we contacted the distributor and put it back in print. So counting of the Omer, the way it is done in a meditative way, depends on some understanding of Kabbalah. Kabbalah comes from the root that means the root lekabel, which means to receive. So it's the received mystical or esoteric or deep tradition that tells us how the world works. And the tree of life, which we'll have one image of in a little bit, is really a theoretical framework for everything, how the world is put together, what keeps it together, how people work. So the tree of life is a theoretical framework for the whole universe. And so let's put up that graphic. It's not wonderful, but it was what I could easily find. And each of these little circles is a sephira, an energy center, or an emanation. And they are mapped to different areas of the body. So CHESED, which is at the right shoulder, you're looking at this person's back. That's why you don't see his eyes or her eyes. So at the right shoulder is CHESED, which is loving kindness, compassion, grace. At the left shoulder, and the focus for this week, Gevurah, strength, discernment, constraint. Then in the center, near the heart, appropriately, is balance and beauty and harmony. By the right hip, Netzach, which is endurance and victory and keeping on going and keeping on going and keeping on going. At the left hip is Hod, splendor or glory. Yesod is at the genitals, the generative power foundation. And down at the feet is Malchut, Shekhinah, manifestation and indwelling presence. So all of these are energy centers that make the world what it is. The arrows are showing the traditional path called the lightning path of how this energy entered into our known world, starting at the top of the head and going down this path until it pervades absolutely everything. So one of the problems with a theoretical framework, especially one that uses some unfamiliar terms or unfamiliar references, is that it's hard to get a hold of. It's hard to grasp because it's also abstract. So one of the things that I've done is to map these theoretical energy centers on the body. So CHESED is here by the right hand, and Gevurah is by the left side, sephira, etc. So what I'm going to do is stop the screen share and show you some, on my own body, some movements that help me kind of ground these energy center concepts in the body. So chesed, compassion, loving kindness, is like, I might have to move back a little bit so you can see a little bit more of me here. So as if you're distributing things with your right hand. It's a movement for chesed, exactly. Gevurah, like this, palm out. All right, pay attention. There's the boundary. That's Gevurah. Tiferet is at the heart like that. Netzach, the keeping going, at the right hip, not in the middle, at right hip. Hod, splendor, glory, like a explosion of sparks at the left hip. Yeah. Yesod is foundation, but also generative power. So it's, we have to stand up, move back one step, like that. Down and out, like a birth movement. And Malchut Shekhinah, palm down, grounded all that energy that's been gathered up and grounded it toward the earth. So that's one way that I found to make these abstract concepts feel more real. Now, on top of all of this, the Kabbalistic tradition says there's 4 kinds of reality, 4 kind of ways of understanding everything in the world. One of them is the physical reality, everything we can touch and see and smell. And then a lot of people think that's the only reality that's real. That's Asiya. Asiya is the world of action, the world of doing, because it's associated with physicality. Yetzirah is emotional reality. And we all know from our own life experiences that emotions are real, even though you can't touch them or measure them, although psychologists have been trying to measure them for years, but you can't because they're part of this other kind of reality, emotional reality. It's Yetzirah. Bria, the next kind of reality, is the reality of knowledge and wisdom. And that's different than emotional reality. We can have feelings about our ideas. We can have knowledge based on what we understand with our guts. And our feelings are also real, even though they're not the same as physical objects. And finally, Atzilut is spiritual reality. That's the reality of those things we deeply know and come to understand and seek to have more contact with that unknowable, but definitely real reality, unknowable on the concrete sense, but not at all in the abstract sense. So we have these four kinds of reality that are all operating at the same time. So back to Gevurah. This is the week of Gevurah. This is the week that sometimes gets translated as strength. But I don't think that Gevurah on the level of Kabbalistic reality means strength at all. It's sometimes translated as din, law, sometimes seen as judgment, as in judgmental, or rigid or harsh, kind of the opposite of CHESED, which is all endlessly flowing loving kindness. But in fact, the way I understand it, Gevurah is not at all about harsh judgment or about laws or about the kind of hurdles that you have to try to jump over. And it's a binary situation. Either you jump over the hurdle and you can continue, or you miss and splat, you're flat on the ground. I don't see Gevurah as that at all. I see it as containment, discernment, the ability to set boundaries, restraint, having filters, having boundaries that are flexible. And so they function as a kind of container in the world. Otherwise, all of these energies, if uncontained, would just scatter, wouldn't be useful to the world, wouldn't be useful for the possibility of increasing our spiritual awareness of that which some people call God, or of each other in some very deep way. So containers and boundaries are a necessary part of this whole system. So what I want to do next is read a couple of paragraphs from my book that talk about how Gevurah shows up in each of these four kinds of realities. Gevurah in Asiya. And if anyone happens to have the book, I believe it is on page 67. Gevurah in Asiya. Discernment in the physical world of action. Each time we act purposefully after careful consideration of the options, Gevurah is at work. When schools send children to programs teaching them about the dangers of illegal drugs, they hope to make children have more informed decisions when they are tempted by peer pressure. When teachers consider which approaches might be most effective to motivate a distractible student or deal with an obstinate one, they're sorting through an array of options to teach Gevurah. Self-control must be developed with guidance and through experience. When we think of role models, people whose lives we admire, We often see moderation and humility, a model of Gevurah in action. That's Gevurah in Asiya. Gevurah in Yetzirah, discernment in the emotional world, the world of feeling. Gevurah teaches us emotional self-discernment, allows us to recognize and affirm and enjoy our own unique strengths, admit our individual weaknesses, and resolve to improve. In many ways, the work of therapy is examining Gevurah in the realm of emotion. As we examine our feelings, scrutinize our responses, and inspect our memories with the help of a skilled therapist, we can learn to distinguish those responses that are helpful from those that harm us. As we do that difficult work, we change. Our self-image can improve, our relationships can be enriched, our role in the community enhanced, and our commitment to ethical action empowered. Gevurah, Gevurah. Gevurah in Bria, discernment in the world of thinking. Our most important learning experiences can be those in which choices are difficult and clear judgment is most necessary. Choosing a life partner is one example. How well do we know ourselves when selecting a mate and making a lifetime commitment to that person? How do we respond when we discover that the idealized image of that person we might have had is not true, that they are in fact not perfect? Perhaps they leave their socks on the floor, curse when angry, or dislike chicken soup. Maybe the person retreats into silence when feeling hurt, rather than, as you expected, wanting to talk out the problem until it is resolved. When our expectations of perfection are not met, we need to think about reality in a new way, making many choices. Making these choices depends on many kinds of information. Gevurah helps us discern the material that is most important and relevant. Are socks on the floor of sufficient reason for a divorce? Is infidelity? Often we gain the most wisdom when our inner strength is challenged, and thus, out of necessity, grow. Gevurah in Atzilut, discernment in the world of spirit and meaning. Spiritual work requires strength. Traditionally, Kabbalah was only taught by direct contact between teacher and student, since the teacher could ascertain whether the student was prepared, strong enough spiritually to be involved with powerful meditations. In some circles, mystical ideas were only introduced to religiously observant married men over 40 years old. Those characteristics, it was believed, gave one the stability to deal with deep and potentially hazardous spiritual realities. Today, when we trust that we are strong enough to engage in deep inner work, we need to proceed with care as we enlarge our capacity to open ourselves up to experiences of the divine. The daily practice of 20 minutes of meditation is a good starting point, but until we develop strong, quote, meditation muscles, unquote, trying to do a 2-hour sitting meditation would be an exercise in boredom, irritability, and cramped legs. Spiritual practice is designed to help us fortify our inner lives, our inner selves, to build up our spiritual stamina. According to Kabbalah, the stronger our own vessels, the more divine light we can contain. Gevurah is the source of that strength. So that is kind of an overview of how Gevurah operates in the 4 worlds. Have to do a time check. Okay. Sunset there. I'm operating on sunset your time. Is 7 something or another.
7:56.
Okay, great. So we are fine. So I wanted us to do the Kavanah and movement for this day, because this particular day, that will start when the sun goes down soon, it will be Netzach Sheba Gevurah, endurance within discernment, day 11. So the movement for the day would be Netzach, which is down here, like a choo-choo train going, because Netzach is the energy of keeping going. Sometimes I refer to it as the energizer bunny, sephira. Keeps on going. You endure. And you get somewhere with that kind of repetitive, constant, focused endurance energy. Within discernment, which is here at the left shoulder, discernment that allows us to plow through the complications of the world and find pieces that are relevant to the situation. So the movement for today is Netzach Sheba Gevurah. Netzach Sheba Gevurah. And doing that with the body positions helps us ground. Question. Mark, Rabbi Mark, did you have a question? You raised your hand.
No, my hand was up for Gevurah.
Oh, okay. So put it on your left shoulder.
It is my left.
Oh,
On
okay.
your right as you're looking at me.
I thought, okay, got it.
That's okay. By the way, that's a good moment to say that if you have a question, raise your hand in your room, but not when we're saying Gevurah, or put it into the chat, and we'll make space for that.
Good. Okay. So the tradition of doing the blessing and the counting says that you do the blessing standing up, and that's followed by the counting. So the blessing is very interesting because many people precede it with a kavanah. It's always a good thing to precede a blessing with a kavanah because it focuses that blessing. Finding the page that I want. Which, of course, can't. So we're not going to worry about it.
29.
What did you say, Dan?
29.
29.
Yeah, the bracha is on page 20.
But the bracha is on page 29. So we'll use that.
If you don't have a book or something to refer to, the bracha will be Asher Kiddushanu, the basic formula, and then end with the words Al Sfirat HaOmer.
Right, but there is a kavanah before that.
Yes, there is.
On page 29. Behold, I am ready and prepared to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer, as it says in the Torah. You shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach, when an Omer of grain is to be brought as an offering, 7 complete weeks. The day after the 7th week of your counting will make 50 days. And that, of course, is the culmination of this Omer journey, which ends in Shavuot. And that's a reminder that this whole Omer process is very much based on ancient agricultural realities. In the ancient Middle East, Barley was the first grain to be ripened and harvested, but that was considered to be animal food because it was really wheat that sustained the people through the year. Now, the wheat gets planted in the early spring, and then the whole time the wheat is growing, people are praying and hoping that the wheat will grow well and will result in an ample harvest that will feed the people for the whole year. So the time that the wheat is growing is a very fragile time agriculturally. And as all fragile times are, is ripe for prayer, for hoping that that ripening will be successful. When the wheat is finally grown and is ready to be reaped, it just so happens that it usually happens about the 50th day, hence Shavuot, weeks. And our harvest celebration in the spring absolutely coincides with the counting of the Omer. And so, in retrospect, what started out as an agricultural prayer time, 50-day time of praying for agricultural success, has now been transformed into a 50-day process of spiritual harvest, which is the way to think about why we're counting up. We're gathering up, we're ripening, we're getting ready for the spiritual harvest that will happen at Shavuot. So, given that background, I will stand up and do the blessing. Please join me if you are willing and able. Baruch atah Yah Eloheinu ruach haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'sivanu al sephirat haomer. Blessed are you, God, source of all power and discernment. You make us holy through your mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom echad asar yom shehem shavua echad v'arba'a yamim la'omer. Today is the 11th day of the Omer, which makes 1 week and 4 days of the Omer. Now, if I was back in that traditional synagogue that I mentioned at the beginning, that would be it. Those words of blessing would be said, the counting would be numbered, and then the service would continue, and nothing else would happen. But that doesn't really reinforce the pairing of the energies, which are Netzach Gevurah, endurance within discernment. So there is this tradition, which I have no idea how old it is, of counting, repeating the names of these two sephirot 112 times. So it would be Netzach Gevurah. That would be 1 repetition. And doing it 112 times. So why 112 times? Well, when back in the ancient days, back to the agricultural image, when the sheaf was harvested, the priest would take this sheaf and wave it. It's called a wave offering. It would be waved in 6 directions, similar to what we happen to do in our fall harvest holiday. 6 directions: to the right, behind us, to the left, in front of us, up and down. And then what's missing is in. 4 times in, for Yud, He, Vav, He. And so I think we have time. We can do these 112. You can join me if you want. I will attempt to keep time. I used to have some Omer beads that helped me with the counting, and I had a flood in my house, and many things were disappeared in that flood, and I think my Omer beads went as well, but I will try to keep count on my fingers. So it goes like this. Netzach Sheba Gevurah. One more thing, that to mirror this image of the wave offering in all these directions, we count in 18s. We do 18 Netzach Sheba Gevurah in this direction, the way we would have waved, 18 in that direction, that we would have if we were waving these sheaves, 18 that way, 18 that way, 18 up, 18 down, and then 4 in. So that's why you'll see me moving my body. Okay? Questions before we start? Okay. Netzach Sheba Gevurah. 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 Netzach shebegevurah. Netzach shebegevurah. Endurance within discernment. As a theme for today, allows us to walk through the day, encountering obstacles, external or internal, and keep on going, keep on enduring with the energy that we have gathered. And that energy is then focused through Gevurah, through discernment, through the many filters which allow us to understand what is signal and what is noise, what is important and what we can release. Netzach shebegevurah is a useful pairing for dealing with whatever it is that we encounter in this 11th day of the counting of the Omer. Amen. So what I'd like to do is to pause for comments and questions, then do a little silent meditation, and end with healing prayers and a mourner's Kaddish. So if you have comments or questions, now's the time to do it, folks.
Marcia, please.
Yeah. Um, I found myself wanting to actually, as with the lulav and etrog, to shake in the 6 directions.
Yeah.
And I thought it helped me count, but I counted differently from you. So it's 18 sets of the 6 directions plus then 4 at the end, or 4 each time. No, it has to be 4 at the end.
So 18 this way, 18 that way, 18 this way, 18, 8. So it's 18 times 6 plus 4.
Right. I counted differently from you, but I assume you're better at this than I am.
Well,
And it felt right for me to do the directions as if I were holding a lulav. Is that ever done in this traditional thing?
yes, it is. And the way some people do that is to say, I am the lulav. 1 repetition, 2 repetition, etc. And so it's another way of feeling that in the body, which always helps. And before my Omer beads disappeared, I had made them in groups so that every time it was time to change direction, there was a slightly different bead, so I could do it with my eyes closed and know when it was time to change directions and start the next set. And then 4 very different special beads at the end. And so this is the first year that I've realized that my Omer beads have disappeared. And since I now realize that, I'm going to have to hit up the local bead store and recreate a new Omer bead counter for myself. Thank you for the question.
Devorah, go ahead. Wait, Devorah, the real Devorah Lesk, as in I've got a secret, please.
There's a few here, yeah. I've had this question for a while, and I probably could go look it up, but I'm going to ask it. There is a historical time lag between counting the Omer in the Torah and the invention of Kabbalistic thought. So prior to the Kabbalistic uh, innovation. Was the counting of the Omer just with the grains, like in Shavua?
Now, the actual counting, the numbering is commanded in the Torah. So the blessing and the counting is a commanded thing. What actions might have gone with I guess you'd call it the enumeration of the counting, those were, post-biblical innovations. But the biblical commandment, Leviticus 23:15, you shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach, when an omer of grain is to be brought as an offering, 7 complete weeks. The day after the 7th week of your counting will make 50 days. So that is the commanded mitzvah.
Devorah, can I cut in here? I think you're asking a different question. Yes or no?
Go ahead.
I think what you're asking is, when was the shift from the counting that is commanded us in Torah to the counting that is leading us from liberation to Sinai, to Revelation. When does it become a ritual of both inner work, as the month of Elul is, and when does it take on Kabbalistic flavors? I think that's what you were asking. Am I correct?
Well, there's kind of like 3 layers. There's before all of that, like when it was just in Torah, and then there's the Kabbalistic part, and then somewhere along the line, it was also this journey to Sinai. So, yeah, how do they all connect? Or I mean, it's not fair to me, it's not fair to ask someone about a historical timeline, but a general idea.
Well,
If you have that.
I can't give you specific dates or anything, but I think
Right.
at the Torah commandment track was in existence, and the celebration of the agricultural flowering and harvesting was another track. And it was only after the realization, probably at the beginning of Kabbalah, that those two things were in fact related, that we got them connected. And it's continuing to flower and grow. I mean, now there's 20 books on the counting of the Omer that you can find in your normal bookseller, or whatever you call it, if they're not really selling the books, but you know what I mean. Availability of different interpretations. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me is that we have in our tradition a agricultural harvest that is absolutely matched with a spiritual harvest. And in Christian tradition, it's Pentecost, Penta being 50. Same thing with the same basis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Or just a reflection on how Rabbi Min's offering this evening has hit you, or what you might be able to use, what you're already using, perhaps based upon her book or not. Please feel free for any kinds of reflections or comments. Otherwise, Rabbi Min, back to you.
Okay. So what I would like to do now is literally a 10-minute silent meditation, reflecting on this theme of Netzach Gevurah, this theme of enduring energy within the process of discernment. So take a deep breath and examine some aspect of your life in the past. You can close your eyes if you're comfortable, or allow your gaze to be soft. Don't focus on any specific thing. And find some incident in your past, some small turning point in your past, where the necessity of decision making was based on your ability to discern among many options, and then have the endurance and the focus and the ability to keep picking away at this issue so that you were finally able to discern what the correct pathway for you was. So we'll go into literally a 7-minute silence. And I will call the 7 minutes when it's up. So I will say thank you all for this opportunity, for sharing something that is for many people obscure and for which I have been passionate for quite a while. One other little thing I wanted to mention is that there are many ways of keeping track of what day of the Omer it is. And the Rabbinical Assembly recently came out with something that you can order from them that's a scratch-off Omer counter. You just scratch off the day and keep track that way. And I also have a wonderful handy-dandy gizmo where you turn the little wheel and it displays the day as you go along with the appropriate counting. So you always need an Omer gizmo, right?
That's the official name of it, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's give a Minyanonic Shabbat. Thank you to Reb Min.
Thank you, Reb Mark, and thank you, all you Moshniks.
You know, last week was so very different than this week. Last week starting off with Rabbi Moshe Halfon, and today, Min, you were the Gevurah to his CHESED, and so we really appreciate you giving of your time so generously this evening. Next week will be Rabbi Phyllis Ocean, and Phyllis is going to be presenting on the sephira of Tiferet. So right there, that balancing point between Gevurah and CHESED. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We're going to go out with the musical rendition of the Omer counting that was put to music by Rabbi Shir Yaakov and others. If you know it, please join me, but stay muted. L'shem yichud kudsha brichu v'shintchintei Hineni mochanum zuman lekayem et mitzvat taseh al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer. Sheva Shabbatot Timimotiena, Sheva Shabbatot Timimotiena, Al sefirat haomer, Al sefirat haomer, Al sefirat haomer, Al sefirat haomer. Hineni Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer, al sefirat haomer. Hayom echad asara achat. Today is the 11th day of the counting of the Omer. Netzach sheba Gevurah. Yai la la di 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 yai yai yada di yai 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 yada di yai yai di 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 yai di di. Say, Rabbi Min, is there a little bit of homework you might suggest? What, something to take away with us, something to work on today or this entire week of Gevurah?
Look for examples in your life this week where you needed that netzach energy, that energy to keep on persevering in whatever way is bumpy right now for you, unsmooth for you right now. And my wish would be that that netzach energy helps you find the strength to move forward, to move through, to move toward light, to move toward peace, toward reconciliation of the inner conflicts, the outer misunderstandings, and toward a world and a soul at peace. That's a bit of homework for you.
Amen v'amen. Yada da ya 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 yada da ya 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 yada da 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 ya ya da da da. Ba'ochem l'shalom, tzidchem l'shalom. Laila tov, everyone. See you next week or sooner. Good night, not Dvorak. Good night, Ruth. And good night, Mary Rita.